Sami, advocate of the High Court and data protection expert. We were discussing the Data Protection Act. She just gone into it because I was like, yeah, what are my rights? And how, are they enshrined either in the Constitution or in legislation in general? And she had just begun talking about the Data Protection Act. But please go on, Abby.
Yeah, so as I was saying now, you have rights that are guaranteed under the Constitution. Hata the Constitution ya kwanza ile kubwa ni the UNHCR, United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, Article 2. You also have the right to privacy under that one. Then you go into the Constitution of Kenya, you have another right to privacy under Article 31. Then the Data Protection Act, what it does is that it gives you a number of rights in relation to data processing. One of them could be you have the right to access your data. So you can go and say, I'd like to see this data. Of course, there are rules and regulations around that they just don't give you the data instantly because maybe there's other people's data there you're not supposed to see, things like that. You have a right to have it, to object to the processing. You can say no. Again, you also have a right to rectification if that information is incorrect. One of the principles under the Act as well, one of the things that we make sure when we're processing data is there are certain principles we have. Things like it has to be accurate. You have to keep it for a limited time, only for the purpose that which you want to use it for. You can go and say we collected people's data for ABCD, but now that we have it, why don't we use it for this other thing? That's not allowed. So you have to then gain consent again. So that access, the rectification, the objection, all those are your rights under the Act. In other words, you have a right to even collect your data. You have a right to have it transferred to another person. So I think what people need to do is go and read that Act. People don't like to read the law. We want lawyers to explain it to you. But a lot of the times these acts are not that complicated, and I actually think this Act is very easy for people to understand. Go and read it, so that once you understand your rights under the Act, you understand the obligations now of the data controller and processor. Let me give a brief explanation of the processor and controller so that people understand. When we talk about a data controller, we're talking about an entity, could be an agency, could be a person, could be a company, whoever, who is the one determining how this data will be collected, used, or in other words, processed. Then the one who's doing the actual processing, that's the data processor. So there are three people you need to know: the data subject, which is you, and then there's also the data controller, that's the one who decides. Then we have the data processor. The one who is doing the processing.
I love what you're saying, and we just played a song called Terms and Conditions. Now, there's some accounts, or if you want to open an account with maybe a platform, they often give terms and conditions, and maybe, just maybe, they include sections or segments that allows you or takes your right away. How then do we defend? We say accept because I want to have this Instagram account either way.
The font is ridiculously small, and the terms and conditions are so many. That I think that is a ploy to make sure you don't read through it.
Terms and conditions are like 300 sentences.
And
I'm
then
not ready to do that.
In a tiny font at the bottom of the
So
page.
how do I protect myself even after giving away this right? Because when you say yes to their terms and conditions, then
the good thing is people can read. People don't like to read. So what I say
at me. I said that the font is tiny and the words are many.
And fair enough. Even on adverts for, like, say if it's alcohol or drugs, they write there not say under 18 in a very small font.
18 years,
But ideally people need to read, because that's the only way you get informed. People perish because they don't have knowledge, and it's there for you. So ideally, what people should do, maybe as the controller, put it in big font, and then also, unfortunately or fortunately, we were trying to find a way to make it easier for people to read. That's one. But ideally, I'd tell people, read. Is it this thing, privacy policies, that you see the privacy notice people are refusing to read? I'd say read, because that's what tells you, number one, what information either this website is collecting about you, if it's going to be transferred, it's telling you what rights, it's telling you what principles also they have made sure they have obliged to, so that at the end of it, them they've raised their hands and said, sisi tuko clean. If you consent and then you come and complain after, no one is to blame there, because you signed to it. You clicking accept. Usually, I think the only trick is we've seen websites where they do this thing, like even for cookies, and then you're told accept all. The deny all is in another page. Now you get bored. You don't want to now go into another page of reading all those things. So you just say, okay, fine, accept. That's not the only problem, because then it feels like your consent is not free.
You made me work for it.
So when we're talking about consent, we use an acronym of phrase like CHIPO, that it should be free, it should be reversible. In other words, you can take it back and say, actually, no, I don't want this. Then it has to be informed. So you need to know. Your privacy notice is that what's telling you, exactly what data they're collecting, where they're going to use it, if they're going to transfer it, what rights you have under there, if you need to if you have a complaint, where you need to go. So that whole thing is where you need to read. So that once that is done, that's informed. You also have explicit. In other words, it should be so clear. There should be no doubt that you give your consent. If there's an ounce of doubt, it's not free. It's not full consent. You also have specific. You remember when I mentioned that there's this thing in the what we call the principles of processing, and one was that purpose limitation. In other words, a controller only processes for a specific purpose. That which they said in that privacy notice. That's it. So that consent of yours is specific to that. It's not specific to other things. It's specific to that. Should they change that purpose, then they need to
come back to you and ask for consent.
Absolutely makes a lot of sense. We'll get into further details about that. I feel like I'm now more confident about what I should do. Because sometimes you really just want to use the product.
True.
And it gives you a lot of rules. So I have learned that you need to protect yourself. Read those rules before you get in. And of course, you'll find a better way to protect yourself.
And maybe they stop calling them cookies, making them sound delicious.